In a small, quiet house on a soft, quiet street lived a little girl named Mira. Mira had a gentle heart, a wild imagination, and the kind of laugh that made flowers want to bloom. She had big, curious eyes and a favorite stuffed rabbit named Button, who had one floppy ear and fur that was no longer quite new. At bedtime, Mira always tucked Button under her chin, pulled the blanket to her nose, and whispered a tiny goodnight to the stars outside her window. But Mira had a secret. Not the kind you tell at recess or whisper to your teddy bear. This secret lived under her bed. It wasn't scary, or dark, or dusty. It was a garden. A secret garden, only awake when the world was asleep. Every night, just as Mira closed her eyes and the crickets began to sing, a breeze of soft whispers would float up from the floorboards. The hush-hush sound was gentle and warm, like the hush of a lullaby or the rustle of a page being turned slowly. And underneath her bed, something magical would begin to bloom. Petals as soft as clouds and leaves that glowed with dreamlight would stretch and unfurl in silence. The soil smelled like sugar cookies and the faintest touch of rain. Flowers the size of teacups opened wide and sighed softly. Tiny stars blinked on in the shadows like fireflies. This was the dream garden, tended by the smallest, sleepiest creatures Mira had ever seen. They were no bigger than a button, no louder than a feather falling on a pillow. Mira called them the wimlings. Each wimling had a little hat made of flower petals and glowing fingertips that left trails of stardust when they touched the air. Some had wings made of leaf veins. Others floated gently like bubbles. All of them hummed in harmony as they cared for the garden beneath her bed. Mira first discovered the garden one very still night when a storm had rattled her windows and thunder had grumbled like an old bear. She had peeked over the side of her bed to look for Button, who had tumbled to the floor, and that's when she saw it. Soft light, moving colors, tiny voices singing a sleepy, wordless tune, and Button waiting patiently on a patch of glowing moss. From that night on, Mira visited the garden whenever her eyelids grew heavy and the world quieted down. The wimlings always welcomed her with a nod and a sparkle. They spoke in bell-like tones that made no sense and perfect sense all at once, and Mira understood, not with her ears, but with her heart. Tonight, as her room grew dim and her breathing slowed, Mira felt the hush-hush whisper rise from the floor again. She slipped from her bed quietly, as she always did, barefoot and careful not to wake the day. She knelt on her quilt and peeked under, and there it was, the garden, blooming just for her. "Hello," she whispered, her voice warm and sleepy. One of the wimlings floated up, a soft glowing thing with a beard made of cattail fluff. His name was Wimby, and he always greeted Mira with a polite bow. "Tonight," Wimby said, "is a very special night." Mira blinked slowly. "Why?" "The wish bloom is waking," he said. A soft gasp escaped her lips. She'd heard of the wish bloom, a rare flower that bloomed only when the stars above the garden whispered the same wish 3 nights in a row. "It's almost time," another wimling murmured, brushing a shimmering path toward a cluster of flower buds that pulsed with a gentle golden glow. Mira crawled under the bed completely now, but it didn't feel tight or cramped. The space beneath opened wide and soft around her, like a glowing blanket fort filled with petals and peace. The air was warm and quiet and still. In the center of the dream garden, surrounded by sleepy blossoms and sighing mushrooms, stood the bud, round, gold, glowing. It trembled gently, and then, slowly, it opened. First a petal, then another, soft as a dream. The light that spilled out was warm and calm, the color of candlelight and honey tea. Mira watched in wonder. Around her, the wimlings sighed and bowed their heads. Some floated upside down to get a better view. The wish bloom swayed once, twice, then it sang, not a loud song, not a real one either, but Mira felt it inside her chest. Like a bedtime song someone once sang just for her. Wimby leaned close and whispered, "Now the garden can listen to your dream." "My dream?" Mira asked softly. "The one you carry in your heart," he said. "Close your eyes and let it bloom." So Mira closed her eyes and slowly she breathed in. She thought of her mama's hugs, warm and long, of hot cocoa with extra marshmallows, of Button's soft fur and stars that twinkled like lullabies. She thought of being safe, of being loved, of quiet moments where nothing needed to happen, only rest. And her dream opened, just like the flower. It rose into the air, shimmering and slow, and danced gently above the wish bloom. A soft hush spread across the garden, and Mira felt sleepy in the best way. Wimby smiled. "It is a good dream." Mira curled her toes in the moss. "Will it come true?" "Perhaps," Wimby said, "or perhaps it already has." The dream shimmered once more, then floated down, wrapping itself around her shoulders like a blanket made of stars. "You may rest now," Wimby whispered. So Mira curled up beside Button on a bed of glowing petals, and the garden began to hum its sleepy lullaby again. The Wimlings worked quietly now, stroking vines, tickling roots, whispering to sleepy stems. Mira felt herself drifting. Her breathing slowed. Her thoughts softened, like petals floating on a pond. She dreamed of the dream garden, of soft moss and tiny glowing hands. She dreamed of Wimby tipping his hat and the wish bloom opening again and again. She dreamed of peace. And up in her real bed just above the floorboards, her body lay still and safe, tucked under a warm quilt, holding Button close. The garden, deep and dreamlike, remained beneath her, always waiting, always blooming, every night while the world slept. The end. Would you like this story formatted as a printable, illustrated PDF or set to calming music for a read-aloud video?